As we close out our study of Leviticus, right before we move into Numbers, and of course, as one of the discussion board topics was named, this is the place where a lot of read through the Bible in a year plans go to die. Leviticus is a place that is a book that's not very well understood. It's ignored a lot of times. It's very rarely preached from, but of course, it is an extraordinarily important book, not only for an understanding of the Pentateuch, but to understand the entirety of the Bible itself. It sets up, as part of the Pentateuch, an important foundation on which the rest of the Bible is built. As a matter of fact, when Jesus is asked what the greatest commandments are, the first he says is love the Lord your God, which is from Deuteronomy. But the second, love your neighbor as yourself, is from Leviticus. He quotes Leviticus when asked what the greatest commandments are. So I think that if this was important to Jesus, it should be something that's important to us. And it's something that, as the discussion brought up also, that Peter seems to think that holiness is a big deal. He quotes Leviticus, be holy as I am holy. When he's talking about it. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what does Leviticus teach us? And specifically, what does it teach us about holiness? Holiness is the key word of the book of Leviticus. If you read the book of Leviticus, you get a very good picture of what it means to be holy. And we see that there are a lot of elements involved in that. A few things that we can draw from Leviticus. I think these are principles that extend beyond the specifics, which is, all the dietary concerns and all of that, which we can discuss their purposes and all of that until we're blue in the face, but we miss the underlying principles that Leviticus is trying to teach us as the people of God. We understand that if we miss that, then we're missing the point of the book, and we're missing very important lessons that we should learn. So some things that Leviticus teaches us about holiness and about holiness in general, I guess we could say that is one, how we approach God matters. That's one of those issues that we see over and over and over again. It's this refrain: when a person brings the offering to the Lord, he's approaching the Lord. If you think of it as the tabernacle set up in the center of the camp, and the person is to draw near to God. Of course, God's presence symbolized in the Holy of Holies, but of course, as he gets nearer to that, enters into the fenced-in area of the tabernacle, approaches the altar, and all of that, he is drawing nearer to God. So he's coming before God, and the fact that is so clearly regulated, it seems to teach us that even though the way it's set up in Leviticus might not be operable anymore, we can say that it seems from Scripture that God does care how we approach him. So that's something we should consider in our worship and in our drawing near to the Lord. A second thing that we can learn about holiness from Leviticus is that holiness is characterized as a relationship with Yahweh. I mean, the whole purpose of holiness is be holy as I'm holy, that he is a holy God in the midst of the people, so they are to be holy so they can have that relationship with them. And their cleanliness and uncleanliness, which is not the same as holiness or unholiness, but their cleanliness and uncleanliness affects their relationship with God, and they have to be aware of that. So that's part of their holiness, and that they have to be aware of where they stand before God, and they have to be aware that their holiness is about the relationship, and how they live their lives affects that. We can also see that, and these are kind of tied together, all aspects of life are tied to holiness. This is something that we don't tend to think about. When Jesus declared all foods clean, doing away essentially with the dietary laws, we start to think, well, these dietary laws are important, so what I eat doesn't matter to God anymore. Well, maybe not in the same way, but Paul does tell us that if by my eating I cause my brother to stumble, I'm sinning. I'm not doing well. So that he says I would give up meat completely rather than to have one brother stumble. So how we eat does matter to God, just in a different way. Does what we wear matter? Well, maybe not mixing fabrics, but perhaps dignity and not going around dressed men like women, women like men. Although that reverse is a little more difficult, but issues of modesty, Things like that. Does God care what we wear? Yeah, he does. Maybe not in the exact same way that he portrayed in Leviticus, but he does care. All aspects of our lives. We can't have this division between this is the part of my life that I deal with when I'm holy, and this is the part of my life that has no bearing on it. This is my life that deals with God, and this is my life that has no. There is no separation between religious and secular. Everything is involved in the question of holiness. All aspects of our life fall under God. And we should pay attention to that. Of course, the New Testament does tell us some things like, we don't have to worry about unclean food or unclean items anymore, but we still have to be aware that what we eat might affect our brothers, and that's what the Leviticus is teaching us. The phone rang, and I paused the video to answer it, so hopefully this isn't too jarring to you. Talking about all aspects of our life are matters that Leviticus teaches us affects our holiness and falls under that. The last, we could say two or one, they're kind of linked, is this idea of obedience that Leviticus teaches us, as the whole Bible teaches us, that part of our responsibility as the people of God is to be obedient to Yahweh and to his commands. That holiness is about that. It's not a earn your salvation by being obedient, but rather it is because you have been saved by God and brought into this relationship with God. That relationship is maintained by obedience. It's characterized by obedience. That's what it means to be holy. That's what it means to be in a relationship with God, to obey him. Jesus puts it this way: if you love me, obey my commandments. That's what it's about. Not if you want to earn salvation, obey my commandments. No, but because you have been saved, because you have become the people of God. Exodus was the great salvific event of the Old Testament. They became the people of God, and then they got the instructions on obedience. So it wasn't you obey and then I'll save you. It's I have saved you. If you love me, obey my commandments. And Leviticus teaches that that is part of holiness, is obedience. We cannot say that we are a holy people if we do not obey God. And that means obeying him not only in our relationship with him, righteousness, that is, worshiping him right, worshiping only him, not having idols, things like that, but also our relationship, the horizontal aspect of that obedience, which is, as I said earlier, Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, quoting from Leviticus, that how we respond to one another is just as important as how we respond to God. If we worship God the right way, but we don't love our neighbor, then we're not really worshiping God the right way. That's why, if you look to the Ten Commandments in Exodus, the first 4 deal with our relationship with God. The last 6 deal with our relationship with one another. And there's no sense here that, well, you can do the first 4 and skip the last 6 and you're doing it right. No, you have to do all. You have to love God and you have to love your neighbor. That's why Jesus says, if you're offering an offering and you realize that your brother has something against you, leave the offering, go be reconciled, and then come back. Our relationship with God is affected by our relationship with one another, and vice versa. If we are to love God and obey him, that means obeying him not only in the vertical part, but also the love your neighbor part as well. And that's what Leviticus teaches us. These are principles that we can draw from the text and teach in the churches, and I think it's very important that we do that.